The Shop Black movement wants black customers to choose black-owned businesses, and since black women are the fastest-growing entrepreneurs in the country, starting businesses at 6 times the national average, there are many more options to choose from. Is it working? Well, a report by Nielsen and Essence estimates that while black buying power will reach $1.3 trillion in the next few years, only a tiny fraction of that money is being spent at black-owned businesses. Black people spend less money in black-owned businesses than other racial groups and ethnic groups, such as Hispanics and Asians, spend in businesses owned by members of their groups.
Well, does promoting shopping exclusively at black businesses ensure that more jobs and income within the black community stay there? Here to discuss this are Renae Bluitt of the In Her Shoes blog, where she recently published an article called 75 Black Women-Owned Brands to Support This Holiday Season and Beyond. Welcome back to BK Live.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And we are also happy to welcome Miriam Milord, who is the owner of BCakeNY, whose tagline is, "Anything can be cake." And you'll see just how true that is coming up. Thanks for being here. We also want to welcome Derek Hamilton. He's an associate professor of economics and urban policy at the Milano School, a part of the New School.
Thank you,
Professor.
Thank you all for being on BK Live. Renae, why don't we start with you? Tell us about the In Her Shoes blog. When did you create it and why?
I launched the blog, it will be 7 years coming up in January, and I created it because I am an entrepreneur. I do PR for beauty brands. I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs, and I knew that we needed a place online that told our stories so that we can empower each other and inspire other people who are interested in, starting their own businesses.
So let's speak to an entrepreneur now. When you get the call to say, hey, we're working on a story about black women-owned businesses in the holidays and beyond, do you feel pigeonholed by that, or you're just happy for more free publicity?
Both ways, I guess. I think it's so important for us to support each other as black women, I think. And it's a combination of supporting the small business movement and the women-owned businesses and the black-owned businesses. So for me, I'm part of all three. So anything with Renae is amazing for me because we share the same values, the same core idea of my business and hers. And yes, it's it's very specific what I do, but I love that it ties in with like having clients that live right next door in my neighborhood, and also sort of nationwide the support of other black women. So yes, I'm a little bit pigeonholed, but I think it's worth it. That makes sense.
Derek, let's go to you. These lists have kind of been around for a long time. What's your opinion on the business they actually create, and beyond that, job creation and things of that sort?
Well, I applaud them. I mean, I think it's useful to have these lists, and so that consumers can shop with their values. If we think that it's a problem that we have this black business gap that exists, and we want to promote it, then we should have these lists so that people who are interested can go in that direction and shop there. At some point, I do want to return to those initial statistics that you started with, the $1.3 trillion. If this is an okay time,
sure.
I'd say that statistics always should be viewed in context. So 1.3 trillion sounds like a very large number, but if you put it in context to white buying power, and then understand that the U.S. economy is a holistic economy where blacks are not a separate country in and of themselves. They're within the wider United States. And you add the fact that blacks don't own the means of production in this country, so the narrative that blacks don't support black businesses gets viewed in some context. First, that $1.3 trillion needs to be deflated by the fact that there are 47 million black people in America, and 2, the white context of what their buying power is, and then 3, if you don't own the means of production, you're limited in the businesses that you can go to in the first place.
This seems kind of like, when you break it down by the numbers, it seems kind of like this Twitter rant about the Wiz being racist. What if we did an all-white version of the Wiz? It was like, okay, we're not going to get into that silliness. But the point is, if special circumstances has been created to keep people of color away from the means of production and participating on that larger scale, why should we not then talk about that 1 point, however many trillions of dollars, and really see it as a separate thing to empower folks to say, you do have this money, and it might be dwarfed by white buying power, but who cares about white buying power because everyone who's selling things on that scale happens to be white.
Yeah, so again, I applaud these efforts to promote black businesses. And this holiday season, I'll be looking to the consumption items that are going to be offered here. I will certainly visit your bakery and look to purchase there because the product is great in and of itself. And also I'm interested in leveraging communities. But the reality is that this trope needs to be put into context in two levels. On the one hand, the $1.3 trillion, it's like reporting the U.S. deficit. I can give you a huge number, but if it's not put into a context of, well, what is the overall economy in general, then it's just a number that creates anxiety or is, what's the word? I can't think of it. It is just a big number that incites people. Yeah. But without context, it's meaningless. And on the demand side, again, the point of not having enough black businesses, well, if you want to shop and have consumption items, we have certain types of businesses that we offer. People have to consume things. We need power. We need et cetera. Right? So if there are no black businesses to support, then you're limited in what you can support. And then one other, actually, I'll go on and then I'll come back.
I just want to get back to Renae's blog for a second. You posted this post of 75 black businesses to support this holiday season. What's been the overall reaction to that list?
Well, the reaction has been extremely positive. It actually went viral. It's the first post that I have had that has had over 16,000 Facebook likes and shares.
What?
And that's not including, the shares from the shares. So people are really excited about this list. There are, as you mentioned, a lot of these lists kind of floating around online right now, but my list is specific to black women-owned businesses, which kind of separates it from the others that are out there. So it's been well embraced, and I will definitely continue doing it year after year. The entire blog is really about supporting black women-owned businesses, but I think a list like this gives people a quick shopping guide and one place to go to for brands. And I had it, separated by different categories, whether it's fashion, accessories, literature. So it's a resource I hope people use all throughout the year.
Has there been any pushback or criticism? Like, where is the whatever owned businesses?
I have not received that.
Cool.
Knock on wood.
We'll talk more about the
just
businesses.
Keep reading the comments section. It's in there, I'm sure, somewhere.
But Miriam, you're one of the businesses obviously on the list. We have some pictures of your cakes right here. What else can you tell us about, your experiences as a business owner?
So first of all, I felt sort of a direct push from Renae's list. I've actually had people come in that said, "Hey,
it's been a cause effect."
Yes, I've read Renae's guide, and we're here to support. So that's definitely happened a few times in the last few weeks, which is so I can feel that movement. That people are actually looking for me as an owner. So a lot of times I think people come to my business and are looking for, an older white man who sits in the background who's the owner, and that definitely has changed a bit in the last few months also, where they're, actually are asking, who owns this, and people are interested.
Can we talk about how unbelievable your cakes are? There's a violin cake, and it looks like a real violin.
Like a violin, and we can eat it.
How do you make that cake? How long does that take?
A few days, and
wow.
There's a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of trial and error, and frustration goes into it.
Are there a lot of ingredients? What are those? Oh my gosh, that looks like a football. It's a gym bag.
Yeah, that was a 13-year-old boy's cake, and that's a food cake where people are always like, are these real shrimp? And I'm like, no, it's sugar.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's a minion.
Yes.
I'm sure that cake is a big hit with whoever it went to. That's amazing.
So back to you, Professor. If we're talking about cakes, let's transition with the Patti LaBelle pies. Everyone was talking about these pies and they sold out. Y'all all running down to Walmart, but you won't support a black business, Miss Edna, who's been on the corner making pies all this time. So if that money that was spent on those Walmart Patti LaBelle pies came back into the communities of color where these people have been trying to sustain themselves, what kind of effect would that have?
Yeah, see, here's how this narrative usually works. We find anecdotes to try to make our claim without doing a systematic analysis. So that's interesting, and I was caught up in the hoopla around the patty pies as well. But let's think about context, and let's think about some relative information. The two tropes the trope that is commonly put forth to explain black-white inequality is some sort of dysfunctional internal to blacks themselves. And that's no different when we talk about the business economic gap as well. So it's usually two narratives. One, blacks lack entrepreneurial spirit that they choose not to engage in business.
Reject that.
Okay,
We don't need
reject
to waste
it.
any time.
The second one becomes, well, blacks don't support black businesses. That becomes another trope that's used to explain it. And again, let's think about context. So let's talk about black-white wealth inequality, for instance. We know that the typical black household has about 6 cents on the dollar as a typical white household, and that the actual wealth gap exceeds $100,000.
Right.
We know that if we look at liquid assets and exclude home ownership, the typical black household has $250 in liquid assets. $250 in liquid assets in comparison to $23,000 for the typical white household. If you exclude retirement savings, the typical black household has $25 in the bank. So we are basically a subsistence population. If you were going to start a business, what is the number one ingredient to succeed in business startup?
A rich uncle.
A rich uncle. Capital finance in the first place.
Yeah.
So if we put all this into context, the reason for the business economic gap between blacks and whites or blacks and other populations is not because of entrepreneurial spirit, and it's not because of a lack of support amongst black households for black businesses. The issue is capital finance to start with. Yeah. And that's it. Now, all these things, again, I support. I'm glad you're having this show, because her work should be profiled, your work should be profiled. But the reality is, when we start making claims that the reasons we have these inequalities is due to some internal dysfunction amongst blacks themselves, that's putting forth a harmful trope that's problematic.
Yeah, I don't think anybody at this table is coming from that point of view,
either.
but I'm glad that you mentioned that. But do we start off talking about black businesses and then a demonstration for reparations broke out?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
There are other policies as well. If we, there are many. I'm not going to dominate this segment. I'll stop. Maybe you'll invite me back, and I'd be happy to come back. But there are other policies that we can put
we've
forward.
got cupcakes, so that's an icebreaker. But that being said, with looking at the numbers and everything that we have now, does it hurt businesses to be singled out, to say this is a black-owned business? Every merchant is looking for any dollar where it's coming from. There's no black way to make a cake, is there?
Well, no.
Or would your customers say, yeah, she made that cake?
I mean, my demographic is really my borough and my neighborhood. So I do still, live in a predominantly black neighborhood. So that's my customer.
Yeah.
It's women mainly. I would say between 25 and 40. That's my demographic right there. And because they decide on the kids' cakes, the husband's cakes, and things like that. So I feel like I'm for my community, really. That's just where the store is in the middle of the community that we're serving. So
they're telling us in the booth to try a cookie, and I don't mind if I do. Everybody get in on this. Renae, I want to get back to you and your blog and the positive influence this list is having. What are some of the 75 businesses, other ones that you have on the list?
Oh my gosh, so I actually have some pieces from a couple of the women. This is by one of the jewelry designers who is local here in Brooklyn. Her name is Lorraine West. She handmade this cuff. This is by a woman based here in Fort Greene, civic, CM. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. What are some of the other businesses? Oh my gosh. There's another fashion designer that's based here in Brooklyn. Her name is Ashaka Givens. There is a store that just opened up in Harlem called Vibrant Beauty, which is kind of been positioned as Sephora for brown girls. So that woman is on the list. So there are so many. I mean, 75, but there's a great representation across different categories.
In her shoes blog.
You're obviously encouraging people to shop at these businesses year round, not just in the holiday season.
Absolutely, year
so
round.
Where do people find In Her Shoes?
InHerShoesBlog.com, and I can also be found on social media at In Her Shoes Blog.
I'm going to ask you the most unfair thing. We've got about 20 seconds. Tell me what we can do to level the playing field.
So my colleague William Darity and I from Duke University have been talking about baby bonds. So if we endowed every child at birth with an account that could mature when they become an adult and use towards some asset-enhancing endeavor like starting a business, like purchasing a home, like a debt-free college education, we could give everybody the capital finance to be successful in this capitalist society.
Awesome.
Dr. Hamilton, thank you for being here. Renae from In Her Shoes, we're obviously going to check it out. And Miriam, I got to say, these cookies are amazing. So good. BCakeNY. Miriam, thank you so much. This is delicious. Thank you all very much for being here, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Glad to be here.